Hey, it's KnightMD, and as you've probably heard, several months ago, a new football game was announced, and it's called UFL, and it's here to compete with the two annual games coming out of EA and Konami. Well, a couple days ago, we finally got a peek at actual gameplay footage, and in this video, I'll be giving my thoughts about it. Now, before I start ripping into this game, it's important to note that this is a new developer, and this is the first version of their game that is still a work in progress. We've all seen with eFootball how even a mere engine change can set a game back several decades, even with a developer as experienced as Konami. More competitors is always a plus, and leads to other games stepping up their game to make for a more appealing product. That said, I won't be pulling any punches and I'll be judging what I see here for what it currently is. Before discussing the gameplay mechanics we've seen, which is what really matters in a football game, let me get the not so important stuff out of the way. The menus and overall presentation seem to be modern and professional, which is something I couldn't ever say about PES since I started playing it a good 15 years ago. Menus seem to look as clean as FIFA's, so that's something they have going for them. Continuing with things that don't really matter, player likeness is extremely underwhelming, given the fact players like Cristiano, De Bruyne, Lukaku, and Firmino are pretty substantial names in the game, and the UFL team was not able to get their likeness right. It is a clear tier below modded or unmodded PES, and of course a massive step below FIFA's faces. And of course body types seem to be down to a single body type, which looks weird on a bulky huge player in real life like Lukaku. Moving on to other things that don't matter, the net physics are just horrible, almost non-existent. They're so bad that the UFL trailer keeps cutting away from a goal before it hits the net most of the time. But I mean, many people think that net physics are easier than they actually are. Let's not forget that before FIFA 22, a company as big and experienced as EA was unable to produce decent looking net physics, and even Konami with its amazing net physics completely lost it when they shifted to Unreal Engine, so I'm disappointed with the nets in UFL, but it's just net physics. Moving on to the last graphical point, but the most important one, the overall pitch, grass, and lighting is pretty bad to be honest. It looks very cheap and dated, even compared to vanilla eFootball. That's not even comparing it to the modded PC version of PES 2021, where the very realistic ball physics combined with beautiful lighting and modded grass result in a game that looks like a real TV broadcast, so much that the creator of UFL himself saw my modded PES 2021 footage and thought he was watching a non-playable CGI recreated real footage that features on betting games such as Rush Football. Back to UFL, the daytime lighting looks really cartoonish with way too saturated colors and an overall simple look that resembles that of a mobile game to be honest. They showed very little nighttime footage which looked almost identical to daytime footage other than the multiple shadows per player. There really is no comparison to nighttime lighting in modded PES 2021, which again looks photorealistic and is tweaked by Jeremiah, who's just an engineering student with no prior Fox Engine development experience. But back to UFL, from a graphical standpoint, the grass looks absolutely dreadful from the gameplay view. Again, it looks like a mobile game. Even when they zoom a little closer to the grass from the gameplay view, there's no detail whatsoever. And looking at the trailer, it seems to show the exact same turf color and pattern. Again, a far cry from modded PES 2021, where Jeremiah's mod gives every stadium its authentic TV broadcast grass color and pattern that change with the season and time of day. Yes, the game has 3D grass, but honestly, even that is overdone. It doesn't look realistic, and it's actually a free asset with Unreal. The real challenge is always getting the grass to look good from the gameplay view, where you'll be spending 99% of the time playing. Now, even though the animations and the FIFA-esque edited scenes look pretty fluid, especially the foot planting, which seems pretty spot on, you need to realize that it's easier to control foot planting when the animations are very limited, and they seem to be just as limited as the lighting options. I mean, look at how every single player is running the exact same way, with their heads all unrealistically turned at the ball while they run. It actually looks very weird, but that's not just a cosmetic issue. Look at how the player turns in this shot. He seems to transition from this direction into this one by doing an abnormal little shimmy or a strafe movement to complete the turn. It's just not smooth at all. There's a few scenes where they shift between different players doing the same animation, and while it's impressive from an artistic trailer standpoint, it emphasizes the fact that this scene is only possible if every player is moving the exact same way with no trace of player ID, so you're able to smoothly cycle between the different players. But then again, player ID is very difficult to pull off, and even though PES 2021 had a plethora of running animations viewable in edit mode, which make every player on the ball recognizable from the way he runs on gameplay view, PES running animations were still robotic, and Konami had to lose player ID completely to improve the realism of running animations in eFootball 2022 at the cost of every player in the game running the same way. which I'll get in my upcoming review of eFootball. Overall, I think it's a net loss because I really appreciated how I used to be able to recognize how Isco handled the ball compared to Cruz's graceful glide or Carvajal's hunched over run. But now let's talk about the impression I got of the gameplay mechanics, which is really the thing that matters the most in my opinion. When it comes to a game, I'll have to decide whether or not to invest my time and money into. Keep in mind that the gameplay they're showing is very scripted for the purpose of forcing a chance to be created for the trailer. Like here, the player 2 defender isn't even running at the ball, but rather his run is aimed at a point behind the player on the ball, and it seems that the whole purpose of his movement is to allow player 1 to make a run into the space behind him. And then they cut to the next shot and zoom in a little, and it seems that player 1 is even further away, while in the meantime, player 2 never even tried to get the ball back. He just hanged around till player 1 made the run. Then player 2 takes control of a defender and slowly jogs towards player 1. And I must wonder, does the person controlling the player 2 defender not know how to sprint, or again is he just doing it for show to allow for a chance to develop without ruining the attack? But then he actually slides at the pass, so it's either the sprinting mechanics are bad or the player controlling the defender doesn't know how to sprint. But let me rewind for the part that's bothering me the most. What is this defender doing here? Like, he's even standing there, happy with his position, even though an open opponent is within his line of sight. But he doesn't even try to get closer as the other defender peels away to meet the player on the ball. This has been a common theme in all the gameplay view scenes I've seen, where defenders robotically move into positions dictated by formation, regardless of where their opponents are. The game's creator posted a screenshot where again, you see the robotic movement of defenders into position, regardless of where the threat is coming from, and regardless of the position of the opposing player on the ball. Football games are very complicated. You have 22 players on the pitch, but you're only controlling 1 or 2 at a time. So it's extremely important to have a solid engine that is able to realistically move your players around, whether it's other defenders you aren't controlling, or moving your players into positions that meet your advanced instructions, which is something PES really excels at. Like you can see in my top 10 manual plays of the year video, how the game engine moves Bale inwards to become a passing option for Hazard. You see, I'm not controlling Bale here. It's his player traits combined with my tactical choice and advanced instructions that is driving him to make this run. Now in UFL, defender positioning is non-existent, and this would be very frustrating when you're playing, because as I said, you're only controlling 1 player at a time, and it's important for the game engine to move your players around with some sort of positional awareness. But here players only seem to be interested in where their formation dictates they should be, giving no consideration to the opponent players around them. Your defending and passing options are only as good as the off-ball player movements happening around you with players you aren't controlling. Finally, ball physics, which unlike net physics is actually game defining, and you will feel its effects immediately when you're on the ball. Before I start ripping into that, let's not forget that even though Konami had not years but decades of experience with ball physics, culminating in the phenomenal ball physics of PES 2021, where the spin of a ball affects the bounce and the direction of the ball heading into a shot affects its explosiveness, they lost it all during their transition to Unreal Engine and eFootball, with horrible ball physics that lack any hint of explosiveness, where the ball's bounce isn't affected by its spin or any of that, which I'll cover in my eFootball review. So understandably, a first-time developer won't be able to make decent ball physics, and that's precisely what I saw in the UFL trailer. Like, watch how the ball rifles out of Lukaku's boots with what seems to be a weak swing of his foot. That said, I actually like the ball speed and movement during passing way more than the abnormally zippy passing of FIFA, although it's still a clear step behind PES, where the ball seems to have a more natural friction with the grass, dampening its explosiveness and leading to more natural looking passing plays. Shooting speed and explosiveness in UFL actually looks good too, but then I'll have to play the game to see how different the ball responds to the shot. For instance, in PES 2021, you get a much more controlled and explosive shot when you hit a rebounding ball, which is super realistic. But in eFootball, these rebound shooting physics went down the drain, so I'll reserve judgment for when I play UFL. And then there's the issue I spoke about in the other video of the ball getting painlessly absorbed into player runs all over the gameplay footage, which just gives you one less thing where room for a skill gap can be developed. When gamers controlling the ball don't have to think about how they'll receive the ball. Like in PES, I would sometimes apply more force on my pass so it bounces higher when I receive it, making a volley easier to take before it touches the ground. Speaking of the skill gap, I can see there's an arrow that seems to be pointing where a pass or shot would head. The game won't be manual because the creator didn't know what manual controls are, so it seems that this arrow is pointing to where the assisted direction of a shot or pass will be heading to. But then again, you can see the arrow under off-ball players, so it might also be where the player's run is being directed at. it's just hard to find room for much of a skill gap on assisted controls, since a shit player can do miracles when controlling an assisted Messi, but a bad player won't be able to do much with a manual Messi. So I hope their definition of skill gaps isn't about executing skill moves, which this trailer had plenty of, so I hope I wasn't too harsh on the game. This is just what I thought of the first gameplay footage of a developer's first attempt taking on a very complicated sport. As I said, competition can only benefit us, the players, so I hope UFL spends the remainder of the year focusing more on gameplay mechanics, because that's what will lead to a higher retention rate when people give it a try when it's out. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.